All right, we're doing this South by Southwest London. I can't believe that this is happening. I've been going to South by for 12 years. I'm so proud to see the community growing here. Hopefully we'll keep on growing. Let's see. Yesterday, they were giving me a hard time at breakfast. Yesterday, I said to my friends, and they were harassing me for saying that I felt so guilty that we had an audience be larger than ABBA yesterday. I think we crushed it, William. So we're bringing... So maybe I shouldn't feel guilty. Didn't. Should I feel guilty? I don't know.
She didn't feel guilty.
It was amazing. And we're going to bring a little piece of that conversation to you here today. If you missed, and we expand a little bit with Lindsay, that we'll be able to bring some applied angles to that's relevant to marketers like yourselves today. But I'm going to start by rewinding on the AI of today to the AI that we used to know, which is machine learning and Alexa. So I'll start with you, William. When you think about how Alexa started, was through the acquisition of your company, Evie. What problem were you hoping to solve at that moment, right at that moment before it became Alexa?
So when you were watching computers on sci-fi in those days, you spoke to them. It was the most natural way to interact with machines. You didn't guess keywords. You didn't select things from menus. You didn't press buttons. You know, the user interface that everybody knows is speech. It's language. This is how we interact with humans. And it sounds, it's also, this is very, very topical with what's happening now. But in 2008, there were these magical computers in sci-fi that you had conversations with that just did things when you told them to do things. On Star Trek, on Blake 7. But the reality was that computers couldn't do that in the real world. So that was the problem we set out to solve. And in 2008, I was going to Google and demoing conversational search, as we called it. And there were people in Google that said this was a worse user experience than guessing keywords. And of course, this is now completely not the case anymore, with hundreds of billions being spent on this amazing technology, LLMs, that have come to the fore in the last 2 years, to create a search experience that is exactly that, conversational. You type in questions, you have long dialogues, you even speak to it. So this has suddenly become true, but this was the problem, me and my team arrogantly set out to solve in 2008. And as I said, the final pivot the final pivot was to create a voice assistant. We launched it almost exactly the same time as Apple launched Siri. So we had an incredibly busy 2012, competing with the biggest company in the world with better tech and better products, a lot of people said. And then when we looked at our options, we made the right choice, which was to get bought by Amazon. And use the tech to build inside Amazon top secret project, code-worded project, which everybody now knows as Alexa. So, and Alexa is about to get a huge upgrade. So it's about to suddenly become this incredibly fluent thing with its install base of hundreds of millions of devices. So Amazon is extremely well equipped to take advantage of the big technology shift that's happened in the last 2 years.
Because the devices, they're already in place. And I'll tell my daughter that, because she's cursing Alexa for being dumber than...
It's apparently being tested by like 100,000 people.
That's really cool.
That's me just using the news reports. So there's a new version that uses LLMs that is in theory being rolled out very soon.
You mentioned Star Trek when we talk about this. I mentioned the Jetsons. You're like, no, Star Trek. Well, did you have influence from the things you consume, like the books you read and the movies, made you dream of things that you said, I'm going to build that?
Yeah, people here from all over the world, but in my childhood it was Blake 7, the computers in Blake 7, which is like a British sci-fi, and there were lots of.
You see my blinks there, like I don't know what you're talking about.
But the Star Trek computer is the cultural reference that everybody will recognize. You speak to the Star Trek computer.
Was that like a BBC thing, or?
I'm not sure it was BBC, but it was definitely British, and very dark sci-fi, and it had really incredible computers in it.
So like OG Black Mirror.
Yeah, but decades before. Yeah, so Aurak, for example. Does anybody here know what I'm talking about when I say Aurak? Yes, great, fantastic. You have to be British, and you have to be, not 25. Yeah.
So did you think, one last question about the past, did you think you'd be in millions of homes? Was it about creating the technology, or did you have that feeling of world domination?
So you can't do the world domination without getting the technology working first. So both. And I think one of the great privileges of being a tech entrepreneur doing stuff in software is if you nail it, it really scales. If you think about it, if you're innovating, I don't know, new types of tires, for example, you can create a new type of rubber, and it will take decades before that spreads across the world because it's sort of it's sort of real world stuff. But if you create a new capability in software, it can spread to every smartphone in the planet in a matter of weeks or months, in principle. We saw that with ChatGPT. ChatGPT reached 100 million users in like weeks, and because it's software. So basically, the really difficult problem is the technology breakthrough. And if you create a technology breakthrough in software that genuinely addresses a real need or creates a new capability, it can scale like nothing else can scale, particularly now.
Got it. I'm going to look back and bring Lindsay in for a second. Did you think you would end up in AI? Was that like an aspiration of yours?
No, I've never known what I was going to be in. But when I look back at my career to date, there is a commonality, which is in working in new, innovative product lines, businesses, the next sort of thing. So I guess in that sense, AI might have been able to predict it.
And now, when we think about being in AI, being a leader in AI, it's also thinking about the risks that AI bring to the table. When you think about the computing power that LLMs have today, you've been very vocal about these risks, William. You talk about accuracy and the need for us to be aware of it. Can you talk about how people are missing, where are people missing their understanding of how large language models work?
Yeah, so large language models is the amazing tech behind ChatGPT that's kind of come of age in the last 2 years. And it's incredible tech. It does amazing, magical things. But what I think people don't realize is that the way it works is a very, very, very sophisticated guess about predicting language. And most of the time, it predicts language that's truthful, but it is also intrinsically capable of producing incredibly convincing language that's complete fiction, so-called hallucination. And this is like an intrinsic industry problem. So if you think about it, it's almost the worst possible application for a tech that lies convincingly is search. It's like, if you wanted to find the most damaging application for it, that would be it. But of course, that is the application that is it's most useful. And people personify. I've learned this with Alexa extremely, and Evie before, that people personify anything that converses with you. So if you have a conversation with a machine, you imagine it's like another human. It's thinking, it's intelligent. But actually, the technology has solved this problem a different way. It's not thinking like we're thinking. And this hallucination problem is a big deal. When you are researching something, if you're making a business decision with a system that's based on LLMs, there's a chance it's going to convince you to make a business decision based on something that's completely made up and not true and not based on the data. And this is the problem we're trying to solve in my startup. But this is really a big deal because the worst possible user experience is to ask a question, ask for information, get back something you believe that's not true, because you then take that into your life, you make business decisions based on it, you repeat it. Some of this goes on the internet. Some of this then ends up training future AIs. So every time that happens, the world becomes a slightly worse place. And this is happening, as we talked about, it's happening at scale. So it's a big deal.
I don't know if you guys agree, but when people complain that ChatGPT was not accurate, can you believe that he lied to me? That tone worries me, because you should expect that, not be surprised by it, because that means that you trust him more than doubting, and I really get freaked out on how this is going. So is there a way to get 100% accurate LLM in a way that this is completely appeased? With the generative AI that we have today, in the form that we have today.
The technology itself, it can't be solved. It doesn't appear to be solvable. It seems to be an intrinsic property of the technology itself. But there's a class of technology called neurosymbolic, which is what my startup is working on, where we combine the magic of LLMs with different types of software. And if you think about your spreadsheet doesn't hallucinate. Yeah, if you add up, if your spreadsheet added up 2 cells wrongly, you'll consider that to be a really serious bug. You don't accept that as an intrinsic property of your spreadsheet. You'll sue Microsoft. You'll complain. It's a bug. Yeah, it's not how it's supposed to work.
But double click on that. Like imagine, like if you use Excel one time and you kind of fucked up, you'll be very pissed off. I don't see the amount of anger happening with generative AI.
But in statistical machine learning, in deep learning, the scientists have a benchmark, and they train the model and they run the benchmark, and it scores 82.3%. And the previous state-of-the-art result was 81%, and this is a huge cause for celebration. They publish a paper. But the glass half empty version of that, of course, is it was 17.3% or whatever it is, wrong. And as I said, in some applications, that's fine. So if the wake word detector for Alexa, for example, if you have to say Alexa a second time, 1 time in 20, that's not a big deal. You can say it a second time. It's a very minor flaw. But if you look at other applications of AI, the opposite example would be the pedestrian detector in an autonomous car. Running over 1 pedestrian in 20 is clearly not acceptable for an autonomous car. For that machine learning system, you need so many nines. It's not true, which of course is why there's been such slow uptake of autonomous driving. And LLMs are deep learning. They're based on that. They're statistical. They are wrong some of the time intrinsically, and they're also very convincing when they're wrong. So they don't often say, I don't know. They will often give you an answer that's exactly what you want to hear, that's just wrong.
So really careful, everyone here who works for a brand, who touches upon AI, really careful when you throw around AI, and really respect that nuance that AI encompasses many different kinds.
Yeah, so where I was going with this neurosymbolic, sorry.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I just want to jump in there and say, sure, but let's look at the incremental improvement. So in our case, we use traditional machine learning methods and layer that with LLMs and put a number like structured prompts in. We tell it not to respond or to tell us if it's not sure, things like this. And we track how every score, what model is producing the score, so we can track back to why a mistake happened, etc. But still, if I ask you out here, if you ask your creative to tag up your creative asset with everything that's in it, how often do they do that completely, accurately, without any human error? I mean, if they'd wanted to fill in a spreadsheet, they'd have been an accountant, not a creative, right? So in terms of incremental improvement, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be a hell of a lot better than what you had before. And if you're not like saving lives with this technology, it's probably okay, right? But I will also add that I recently was in a very interesting conversation with a guy who procures AI technology for one of the leading hospital groups in the UK. And he said that the most experienced consultants at detecting cancer are roughly 75% accurate. People who are in their 60s, who've been in their career, years and years. And the AI models can do it to 85% currently. Now, I would take those odds, personally. Well, the question is, on top of the machine, though, is the human integration with it, right? So this is where we can offset some of that risk as well. We can take decisions about how we communicate this stuff. And as I always say, in the early days of sat-nav, you get all these stories in the paper about people driving off a cliff. Like everyone in this room, it has sufficient ability of critical thought to maybe look at something and go, should I maybe not drive off the cliff and just follow what the machine says? Yeah, so I know it can be very convincing, but I also think that we are, certainly in this room, sufficiently intelligent to have a little bit of critical thought on results.
I want to bring that as a segue to you. Yes, if it's not a life or death decision, maybe that's a way to boil this down to. And yes, an 80% is better than a 70%. But I have high risk of cancer in my family, breast cancer in my family. I have false positive results every year since I started screening. It's very annoying. I did my first AI screening last year. It was incredible. It was the first time that I got a negative. I always get a positive and I get a mini heart attack. I'm gonna die. Like every year I get freaked out because it's not just a positive. It's like, oh my God, this is bad positive. It really freaks me out. But I want 100%. So how could we get there?
Yeah, so the class of technology we work with is neurosymbolic, where we're combining that spreadsheet accuracy with the statistical machine learning. And by the way, I agree that there are situations where as I said, there are situations where being wrong some of the time works, and that applies to cancer too. If you've got a human double checking and the machine learning model is catching things that the human missed and there's a net benefit, then that's a pattern that works. But if you've got something that's fully automatic, for example, it doesn't work if decisions then get made that are wrong. And so with the hallucination, the LLM is often producing stuff that's completely convincing to the human. So it's not, it's you know, if it's hallucinating one time in 3, you would learn very quickly to double check. You wouldn't drive off the cliff. You'd double check everything it said. If it's hallucinating one time in 50, you're going to trust it, and most people will just take it as accepted as true and act on it. And yeah, life and death decisions obviously are hugely something you just simply can't automate. But we deal with high stakes industries where, for example, where breaching regulation is a huge problem, hugely brand damaging, can result in huge fines, or where business decisions involve very large amounts of money. So if you make a business decision that's wrong based on this technology, it can actually cost your business a fortune. So there are situations where it is really important, and I agree there are certain product patterns and certain product situations. I mean, the creative stuff, for example, is a great example of something which is, it doesn't matter very much if it's wrong some of the time, I agree. But there are definitely patterns where that isn't true.
What's interesting, though, about our industry is that creative agencies and production agencies have made lots of money out of convincing brands that it needs to be absolutely perfect. So you may have creative agencies that sell into you and say, you can have as many revisions of this asset as you like. And I know this, right? I see this, like major US airline goes, right, for this, 20% discount that's going to be live for a week, I think the aeroplane just needs to be a pixel bigger on this paid media asset. Really? How much are you paying to change that pixel? No, it does not need to be a pixel bigger. And I can actually tell you not only why, but also how much it does not matter, right? So we can start to put data behind that. So, it is, though, quite threatening to these industries where, I know a lot of brands who are actually basically afraid of their creative agencies. They pay a huge amount of money for the right haircuts to come into the room and tell them how big the aeroplane should be on the asset. True that, right? Right, and then to go back to those people and say, actually, I don't care about your haircut, the aeroplane doesn't need to be that big, seems really, really painful and emotional and personal, right? So when you bring the data in a funny way, we don't actually do a huge amount of conversational in our platform because it benefits us if a computer says no, right? When you go and put your PIN number in and you get it wrong, right? You don't go, I fucking know my PIN number, I've had this since I was 16, how dare you tell me I'm wrong? You just go, oh yeah. And then you change it. So that is the danger with automation. But at the same time, it's a huge benefit because then it's not personal. It's not my opinion versus yours. It's the data says that actually changing the size of this aeroplane is not going to drive engagement. It's a waste of effort. It's a waste of cost. What you should do is this instead.
I saw you shaking your head a little bit. What are you thinking?
I was just thinking that I do have that argument when it says my PIN number's wrong.
Yeah, me too, honestly. It's very personal.
So what should be the mindset right now? Because there are a few narratives that are emerging here. We have one thing that I've noticed before joining Under Armour, I was at Estée Lauder, and I had the honor to be able to train thousands of employees on the basics of generative AI. And one thing that I've noticed, and people keep asking me, and Brand Innovators was the first place that this happened. They asked me last year on stage, what's your favorite AI book? And everyone was like, ready to write down this AI book that I was going to say. It's the most formative book for me, for my career. And I gave them a psychology book, which is Mindset by Carol. I think that book just says everything, because what I saw going through the workforce in my previous organization, I didn't see an age gap, I saw a mindset gap. So if you're out there thinking about your job today, holding on to the way things are versus leaning into what they're gonna be, that goes beyond age. And that is really where you need to go, because what you describe with agency, it's gonna happen. There's gonna be displacement, but maybe it's displacement of mindset, not as much people. There's gonna be displacement of people, but the displacement, the most brutal displacement that's going to happen first, it's mindset displacement. And I don't know if you agree with that. That's my theory.
Well, I mean, it is very challenging when you've effectively built a relationship with a brand, often over many, many years as their AOR, by saying, we know and love your brand so much that you can trust us and you can have and we bend over backwards. But the reality is there are many juniors in these creative agencies working 24 hours a day, moving pixels that don't need to be moved, right? And also, I think brands are beginning to be a bit like, well, this is costing me a lot of money. A lot of money. So do I really need all of that, particularly in a scaled content environment where you've got to produce a lot? I don't want 10 rounds of QA, and neither should I, because this Snapchat asset's going to live 2 hours if you're lucky. So yes, there is a shift in mindset. I think a lot of people, I think the economics of it will drive a lot of that. But it's also about risk tolerance, which is coming back to what we were saying, which is not all content is created equal. What is good enough? And what we try to do is put data behind what is good enough so that everyone across the marketing spectrum, from creative to media, can all together say, this is the right asset. It's good enough, it will perform. This is probably how it's going to perform, and it can go live now.
So William, Lindsay with SmartAssets, they were able to leverage LLMs, create an approach to it that gives incremental gains for brands, right? You were thinking from the standpoint of how can I up the ante, because they will build upon the technologies that are available to them. You could be one of the technologies available to them in the future to build upon. So how could all of us have areas of our businesses that we want total accuracy around decisions, even our lives? So how could we start tapping into this? When can I start playing with your stuff? Like when is it going to be available for us to
we're in market.
Experiment?
We're in market. We've got customers. We're a little bit early, but we have very substantial neurosymbolic tech that addresses these issues. So for example, we've got an early customer in the insurance industry, claims processing, for example. We've got a relationship with a big retail bank. Claims processing is a great example. You don't want to automatically pay out on a policy if it's not true. And if you take an LLM, sort of even a reasoning model, give it a policy, give it a claim, you get results that are all over the place. You get things. It confidently says the claim's valid. It confidently says the claim's not valid. It gives explanations that are all over the place. If you run it twice with exactly the same data, you'll get different results. It's contradicted by different models. So one state-of-the-art model will give a completely different result from another state-of-the-art model. And what you want is complete consistency. You want an auditable explanation. This is important for the regulation. And you want precision. Precision meaning if it gives you an answer, it's correct. So if precision excludes I don't know. Does that make sense? So if you're not sure that you want the system to say I don't know, you can always have a human review it and makes the claims decision. But if the automatic system says yes or no, it's got to be right. It's got to be 100% right. And then you want to have really clear, auditable explanation of why that decision was made. And that's the power of sort of neurosymbolic tech, the combination of the magic of LLMs with the sort of proprietary symbolic technology that we do at UnlikelyAI.
I know when you decided to take over the world one more time, you were not thinking about creatives, but I have a question here. I'm going to see if you guys can collaborate. So one of the pain points that we have when we think about AI for creatives is creatives don't understand that when they ingest an image, like for instance, imagine like a product shot that's on the beach and you need that product shot to be switched to camp, to a different location. You ingest in humans, they are real, and then LLMs will give you something that it doesn't look quite real anymore because they are not good at taking the real and making real again. The real like is just a little androgynous, it's not quite enough, the spark in the eye, there's something missing. Because of that, what you're describing, the way it's unreliable. Does the output changes, like when you add neurosymbolic to it? Can you put like a creative that's real and get an output that's still real? Like, does it control a bit of that?
In principle, yeah. I mean, you're adding a sort of reliability algorithmic component to what you were doing before. So
we need to launch UnlikelyAI for creatives then. So what was the most surprising insight that you've seen with your clients, Lindsay, that they didn't expect?
Well, when we first got funding for SmartAssets, Mark Penn, who's the chairman of Stagwell, said to me, but Lindsay, I don't need this because I know that baby on a tire wins every time. Free sex click here wins every time. And interestingly, we've extended to apply our technology across lots of different channels now. And we recently did some work with a major CPG company in the US on their diaper line, right? And we took all of their influencer content, ran it through our models, and we identified that having children in influencer content, babies in influencer content selling diapers, has no impact. Now, why is that so interesting? Because they were deprioritizing using influencers that would not show their children in the content, which is a growing group of influencers. We then said, we also were able to identify things like the importance of nano-influencers, like the importance of ums and ahs, how frequently the scenes change, etc. But that was really like a thing, right? And then they asked us, well, can you tell us if it matters for our competitors? And the beauty of influence content is, yes, I can, because I can scrape all of that off the internet. So very powerful. You know, I can go to, as I did the other day, a sports bra brand and say, would you like to know what about Lululemon's influencer content drives engagement? Yes, please. So that, I mean, and it's always different every time. And that's why I love my job so much, because we did some stuff with a brand you used to work with, and found out about found out about the importance of before and after pricing on a discount, putting the before price, like the impact on click-through rate of doing the maths visibly in front of the customer. Things, tiny things like this that have really incremental impact on performance. And every time, for every audience, for every platform, for every brand, it's different. It's absolutely fascinating.
I wanted to show that slide, real quick. Yeah, and I just want to show that slide and ask one last question for each one of you. So this is like UnlikelyAI. Anything that you want to share that we haven't touched upon here, William? And when can us mortals, not companies, be able to have access to technology like this?
Well, you can get in touch. As I said, get in touch right now.
Oh, he did not say that yesterday, by the way. Yesterday when I say, when can we use it? He's like, oh, you can't. Like, someone in the future maybe. So you guys are special. I didn't expect that answer from you. I'm like, okay, good. All right, so before we turn into Q&A, is there one principle of using AI wisely that you would like us to walk away with? They think people might be missing, aside from understanding that it hallucinates a lot.
Yeah, I think it's just going back to the human integration within that, particularly in the industry that we work in production. It's historically a very human-driven, personality-driven industry. The rate of technological change is fast, but you have to bring humans along with that, and often humans don't keep up that well. So not forgetting the human element in that, I think, is incredibly important in making successful use. And that's why we've wrapped managed services around our platform. You know, because when you come up with something innovative that no one's ever used before, and they don't want another bloody app, Christ, I don't want another bloody app. To also then have to understand it's quite difficult. So I think we've wrapped humans around that, and I would encourage brands to do that as well when they're embracing technology, to invest in the business change support that needs to go with that.
William?
Yeah, I think a realistic understanding of what it can do and where the limitations are is pretty important. It appears magical, and it is magical in many ways, but it also does have limitations. So yes, if you're building with AI, you need to kind of understand what's realistic, and be aware. Just because it does magical things with examples doesn't mean it will not be wrong. Some of the time will give you bad results when you really deploy it or do it with real business cases at scale.
And here's me. I know I'm going to do one of those, how many of you, but stay with me. It's not going to be boring. Okay, so how many of you uses AI at work daily? Raise your hand. Okay. How many of you uses AI at home? How many of you use AI at home more than you use at work? That's the key. And I think that's really important, because something that I'm noticing is we associating AI with a tool for work and not understanding that's a tool for humanity. That's something that's a human on the loop process that you use it wherever you go. It plans my meals, it plans my vacations, my kids use it. They know how to use it responsibly because we talk about it, we use it together. We use it again, like around each other. We played with creating little agentic processes for the house together. So this is where you really learn. It's at home. And if you get stuck and if you feel dumb, ask it how to unstuck you. And if you're afraid that's going to hallucinate, ask for a source, click on the source. Sometimes it's not what the source says, so you can double check. Go to another one, go on Perplexity, check, go on Google and check. Like, take the input put in a different models and see how it varies. So if you're really making a major decision, cross-examine it, and you get smart and you show up at work much, much better if you use more at home. So that's my wrap-up, Alex.
Fantastic. Well, excellent panel. We'd like to open the floor for some questions. Yes, I have to come to you for the mic. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Sorry, it's a bit of a UK-based question, but hearing the provocation that you talked around with regards to hallucination, is there anything that we can learn from the Horizon post office scandal, which seems like the first hallucination at scale in the way that you talked about it?
I don't think that was hallucination. I think that was a bug. That was bugs like in traditional software. But yes, it's a great example of how you shouldn't trust software. Even non-statistical software can have problems and bugs. And obviously in that case, the result was people going to jail and being prosecuted and having criminal records. So that's an example of where software going wrong has very, very serious real-life consequences. So it's not limited to deep learning and LLMs and machine learning, but it's definitely happens there intrinsically. Yeah. Yes, I think that's right. So I don't know the details of exactly what went wrong with that post office system. Obviously, I've heard the news reports, but clearly it was producing data that people were believing, and they believed that the postmasters were stealing money when they weren't. So yeah, it's a great example of people trusting software more than they should.
And that's why governance is so important. So when you create the systems, when you hear people talking about agentic systems, people get really excited about the little robots doing things by themselves. But where you put in the human the checkpoints is the part that I get more excited about.
Okay, another question.
William, I liked your example of Star Trek being like your early influence on AI. For me, it was definitely the Terminator and Skynet, and definitely the negative side. So question for you is, how will we police an AI world, particularly with like deepfake and stuff like that?
That's a question a lot of people are trying to answer.
And follow up, are we all going to die?
So on the latter one, I hope not. But I think if you want to be a little bit darker, I think a world where we trust things a little bit less is definitely coming. When I was building Alexa, if you wanted to voice clone someone, they needed to spend 2 weeks in a sound lab, and you needed to pay like $100,000 to a specialist company to produce a computer voice that sounded like a real person, and you get a voice actor in action. They'd sit in a sound lab for 2 weeks. Now you need 3 seconds of their speech, 3 seconds only. And in fact, an open source model was released just last week. So anybody now can clone anybody's voice with just a 3-second sample of their speech and create a computer that sounds just like them. And it won't be long before we can do that with animated faces. So it won't be that long before you can't even be sure you're talking to a real person on Zoom. You have to actually, be physically present to actually be sure that you're actually talking to a real person. So there's all sorts of stuff happening that's going to make the world a little bit less trustworthy or a little bit easier to fake. And the solution for that, there will be solutions for that. But I think. I don't want to be negative, but that's these are the sort of consequences of the technology, the negative consequences of the technology advancing.
I think it's quite a natural cycle. If you look at what's happening in news at the moment and the future of news, there is a big uptake in much younger segments of society in reading news content from respected sources rather than just what they get from an influencer, because they're becoming aware of that. And it's very much like, the way we've gone from processed foods back into organic, into like handcrafted things having very high value, not just branded products that are mass produced. I think it's all part of that natural cycle of at some point you don't want the machine and there's going to be a return on it. But I think we will ultimately balance out, and it's just a process in a matter of time. Unfortunately, there will be losers in that process, but it's kind of inevitable, I think.
No, this is really cool. And when you're talking about the trust, how we know we're going to trust things more or less. And I see my alpha girl, I have an alpha and a Gen Z, she doesn't trust anything. I think because, she's an iPad kid. Not that she's on the iPad, but she's surrounded by that technology. And I think that means also IRL events, right? We're going to be coming together in person more, coming out of that COVID generation. Now we're going to swing in another direction, which I think it's fascinating. Are we on time? Okay, so this was it. Thanks for the participation. Thanks for being here.
Give it up to Liz, William, and Lindsay. Thank you.